Hi, everybody. We're back after some really terrifying technical difficulties that we got through. That's why we weren't on last week. We're back. We've got the sound fixed, I think. And I think we're going to be able to upload this and it won't be any problem. And I won't have to use a laptop, which was what I was afraid I was going to have to do. But we're here, so great. It's back with OnFilm, on video. I'm Philip Martin, and we've been doing this 15 months. And we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep doing the OnFilm column this way because, frankly, we needed a video component for our product, and I don't have time to write that much anymore. And I'm already writing another column called New Movies, which is about whatever I want it to be about, so it becomes kind of like what OnFilm used to be about. Anyway, the pandemic, I'm not going to say it's almost over. I'm going to say that most of us have the ability to choose what we want to do now. And if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask and you're vaccinated, I don't think you have to wear a mask. Now, I'm still wearing a mask sort of in solidarity to other people just to kind of make them feel safer and stuff like that. But I've always sort of said that even though selfishly and stupidly that I thought, I wasn't going to catch anything, I wasn't going to get really sick, I still wanted to, make everybody else feel good about it. And it wasn't for me, it was for other people. So I'm still going to wear a mask in some situations, but I am going to also go to movies, to restaurants, to concerts, to ball games, and stuff like that. And we'll see how it goes. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 15 months? Jeez, But we're here where we are, and we've got a summer movies schedule coming up. And I think it really starts with Fast and Furious, or F9, on June 25th. But we've got In the Heights this week, and I have to say that I'm not excited about In the Heights. But then I wasn't excited about Hamilton until I saw it. So we're going to reserve comment on that because we haven't seen it. I don't like to do reviews of movies I haven't seen. One of the things that we got a different mindset during the pandemic, and one of the things we started doing, just personally, is that we started taking our Saturday nights and just pulling a movie out. Just a movie from the collection. And we have, as you might guess, a pretty big collection, pretty deep collection here. We have a couple thousand movies. And, a lot of them, it's really staggered. It's really, skewed toward the last 10 years, because a lot of those I got for free. But we also have some older films, and I kind of keep a small collection back here. This is my collection for my classes and stuff. These are the ones that I want to pull out and kind of talk about. And I've been pulling them out of here these last few Saturday nights. And, going back and seeing movies that I really wanted to see and wanted to see again, wanted to rewatch, movies that are 50, 60, 70 years old. I saw, just the other night, we watched The Gunfighter, which is a movie I saw in my youth, a 1950 movie, so I didn't see it when it came in theaters. First came out in theaters, but I had seen it at some point in my youth, and I had really been wanting to watch it again since 1998 when I read Richard Slotnick's book, Gunfighter Nation, which is a book about violence in America. It's the first part of a trilogy, actually, but it talks a lot about the gunfighter myth. The myth of the Old West, where you have these guys facing off in the street and quick drawing, and they had all these kind of chivalric rules about these contests. It was almost like they were, heavyweight champions or heavyweight boxers going around and fighting each other in the street to see who the winner was. They were actually actively seeking out bouts and stuff like that. And of course, that's nonsense. That's not the way anything ever happened. Anything ever I mean, there were shootouts in the Old West, but people were shooting shotguns and rifles and hiding behind things and sneaking up on people and trying to get the drop on them. But we still had this codified idea of the gunfighter as a professional killer who, was for hire or just went from town to town to prove how fast he was. From 50s Westerns is where we get them. Maybe 40s and 50s Westerns, maybe 30s and 40s and 50s Westerns. But The Gunfighter, which is 1950 film by Henry King, who worked with Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck is in this movie. It's the second time they worked together after 12 O'Clock High. And they did 6 movies together. And Henry King basically said, Gregory Peck's my favorite actor, and I like to work with him. Anyway, the Gunfighter is a very interesting film, and it has a lot of resonance today, I think. Maybe more so than when it came out, when it was really kind of a flop. It wasn't a critical flop. It was nobody went to see it. And one of the producers blamed the mustache that Gregory Peck affects in this movie, which is a periodicenic mustache. And it is like his character is based on war. In the movie, Gregory Peck plays a aging gunfighter. He's 35 in the movie. Gregory Peck was actually 34. He plays an aging gunfighter named Jimmy Ringo. Now, Jimmy Ringo, as far as I know, was not a real person. But there was a Johnny Ringo. And Johnny Ringo is one of those people that, sort of is in the mythology of Tombstone. And the mythology of Tombstone comes from a very specific place. It comes from Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp lived a long time, and Wyatt Earp in the 20s and 30s hung around on movie sets in Hollywood and talked to people and told them things. And basically what he told them was, I'm Wyatt Earp and I was really cool back in the day. He wasn't really well known until we started making movies about him. We started making movies about him because he got in the ears of people like John Ford, who did My Darling Clementine, which is another movie I pulled out earlier this year for us to watch. And it's Henry Fonda plays Wyatt Earp in that, and he plays him as this kind of shy, awkward, kind of prissy figure that's really sort of funny. But Ford said that the iteration of the gunfight at the OK Corral that's in that movie, which actually wasn't even known as the gunfight at the OK Corral until 7 years later when they made the movie Gunfight at the OK Corral. This was just some shootout. He said that this was the way it happened according to Wyatt Earp, and he followed that as closely as he could, which would make it about the only accurate thing in My Darling Clementine. But anyway, so we're not talking about My Darling Clementine yet this week. This week we're talking about the Gunfighter. And the Gunfighter comes along a couple years later. And what they had wanted to do, what Fox was wanting to do, was wanting to make a prestige Western. Along the lines of My Darling Clementine, as a matter of fact. They wanted something to compete with that. Something with a star in it. Something that, adults could go see that wasn't like some genre picture. So they hired Andre de Toth, who was better known for writing noir scripts. Okay? And he is going to write this Western. He's got this assignment to write this prestigious Western. So he goes to this book, a 1934 book, and I forget the author. It's called Trigonometry. And it's a gallery of Old West gunslingers. And he's pouring through this book. And in this book, he finds an entry on Johnny Ringo, who was associated with the Clanton gang in Tombstone, who shot it out with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and stuff at the OK Corral. Now, Ringo himself was not at the OK Corral shootout. He didn't have any part of that, even though in various films he's been depicted as being there. In fact, he's even been killed there in a couple of movies. But he did have some, bad relations with Doc Holliday and with Wyatt Earp. And after he died, which was probably a suicide, both Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday said, "Oh yeah, I killed that guy," But he was quite an interesting guy because he grew up poor. he's from Indiana. And his family, when he's 14, goes across the country to California. They settle in San Jose, California. And while they're on their way there, his father gets up in the morning, comes out of the wagon. He's got a shotgun, and the shotgun goes off and blows his head off. They bury him by the side of the road, and they keep going to California. And this is a really interesting kind of thing because this gets reported in newspapers and stuff because some guy witnessed it, and he wrote a letter to somebody, and the letter gets reprinted in newspapers. So we have a pretty good, and his mother, Mary Ringo, the wife of, what was this guy? I can't remember his name, Mark Ringo or whatever, but Martin Ringo. Martin Ringo shoots himself, accidentally or accidentally on purpose, who knows. And it's horrible. The shotgun goes in, and the family is there, and they just, nobody knows what to do, so they just bury the guy, and they keep going to California. Okay. So once they get to California, get to San Jose, young Johnny, is a delinquent. He's a bad kid, apparently. Maybe not, maybe so. It's just that this is the legend. He leaves them after a few years when he's a late teenager, early 20s maybe, and he goes to Texas. And he goes to Texas, he gets involved in the Mason County War, which is also called the Hoodoo War, which is, in Mason County you had a bunch of German, ethnic German cattle ranchers. And in those days, people were not all that particular about whose cattle they were driving to market. They would just drive a bunch of cattle to market, and once they got there, they'd settle it. If they had strays, well, that was fine. They got that, but they had people's other brands. They were supposed to compensate the ranchers, and they didn't always do that. So there was, rustling was a way of life, and everybody did it. But the Americans that were in the county surrounding Mason County, picked on the Germans, and the Germans picked on the Americans. And Johnny Ringo arrives there, and he makes friends with this guy named Scott Cooley. And Cooley is an ex-Texas Ranger, and Cooley was adopted as an infant by one of these Texas ranchers who gets caught up in the war, and the Germans end up killing this guy. One of them kills him. So Cooley and Johnny Ringo go looking for the guy that killed Cooley's adopted father. And they don't get him, but they get other people, including his brother. And eventually about a dozen people die in this Mason County War. And the Texas Rangers come in and keep the peace. They arrest Cooley and Ringo, who are busted out of jail by their outlaw buddies. And then they get arrested again. And it ends up, after a while, it's just like Ringo stands trial or doesn't stand trial. But anyway, he gets acquitted, and he goes away for a while. He comes back and becomes a constable in a little town in Mason County. Sticks around there a couple of years. Heads off for Tombstone, Arizona, where he gets on the bad side of Doc Holliday right away. He shoots a guy for not drinking with him, which is one of the things. He shows up in town, and he shoots a guy for not drinking with him. And the guy doesn't die. The guy goes, "Hey, I just wanted beer rather than whiskey," But he's a mean guy. He's an alcoholic. He carries himself well, apparently. All the stories was that he could quote Shakespeare and he could speak Latin, and people took him for an educated guy. They thought that he had gone to college or something. He hadn't, but he read a lot. What are you reading for, as Bill Hicks would say? Well, so I'm not mistaken for a stupid cowpunk. I'm going to be Johnny Ringo. I'm going to have this reputation as this refined gentleman. And he worked at that reputation. He worked at becoming this guy. And he's affiliated with the Clanton Gang and the Cochise County Cowboys is what they're called. And they would rob trains and rob people and kill people and stuff like that. He rode with them sometimes. Who knows exactly what he did and what he didn't do? There's a lot of stories about that. And Wyatt Earp and, of course, Doc Holliday are on this other side, and they don't like him and all this. And they think that he had something to do with the wounding of Virgil, which left him, crippled the rest of his life, and the murder of Morgan, who was killed in a pool room. But, again, we don't know what happened. They said it. And so the upshot is that at the end of this, Earp and Doc Holliday and a bunch of guys go out, and it's on the Vendetta ride. Vendetta ride. V is for Vendetta ride. They're going out after Johnny Ringo. And they don't find Ringo, but they do find Curly Bill Brocious, who's, if you've seen Tombstone, he's a character in there, and he's great. Well, so was Johnny Ringo. Was also a character in Tombstone. But anyway, they go out and they kill a bunch of people, but they don't get Johnny Ringo. And Johnny Ringo, at this point in his life, is like, he's like 32. He's like going, man, this is really tough. So he goes back to California to his family, and he wants to reconcile with his family. And his mothers and his sisters and his brother Charlie go, get out of here. You have disgraced the name Ringo. We can't, it's horrible. You're awful. Get out. So they reject him. So he goes on this 10-day drunk. He comes back to Arizona and is seen drunk every place, and he's just depressed. And apparently he was depressed a lot of the time anyway. There are a lot of stories about people not being surprised when he turns up dead at the end of the 10 days because he kept saying he was going to kill himself. And they always go, well, go ahead, can I watch? Whatever, whatever you do. When someone like Johnny Ringo says, I'm going to shoot myself, yes, sir. And he's found in this place called Turkey Creek, leaning against this tree, and he's been shot in the right temple and the hole in the back of his head. And there's all kinds of questions about it. Number one, the coroner said it was suicide, and the coroner, who knows whether the coroner was an honest coroner or was a crooked coroner or whatever. But anyway, after he dies, both Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday separately claim they killed him. Other people claim they killed him. I'm inclined to believe it was suicide, but that's just because that's what I want it to be, because I want it to be symmetrical with his father blowing his own head off. And I want that to come back around and be, kind of poetic for Johnny. Anyway, so we don't know, but this is the story of Johnny Ringo. This is basically the facts that we know. So Andre de Toth knows this story, takes it right out of the trigonometry book, and he plays with it a little bit. He, makes the guy Jimmy Ringo, and Gregory Peck, bless his heart, grows the mustache so he will look like the pictures of Johnny Ringo. A Fox executive later told him that mustache cost him $1 million. But anyway, it's this mustache. If you don't like it, you don't like it. A lot of people don't like it. Anyway, so the story in The Gunfighter is that it starts in Tombstone with Jimmy Ringo there in a bar room, and Richard Jekyll won't leave him alone. He's a young whippersnapper, and he just won't leave him alone. And finally, he gets him, and he draws on him. And, of course, Gregory Peck, as Jimmy Ringo, guns him down. And everybody at the bar goes, yeah, he drew first. It's legal killing and all, but this guy's got three brothers, and one of them's Alan Hale, who's the skipper on Gilligan's Island coming up pretty soon, or in 15 years. And you better get out of town. So Jimmy gets out of town, and Jimmy goes across the desert. Really pretty cinematography. It's black and white, and it's got that deep focus look. When you look down the bar room, you can see everything. That's it's really gorgeous. And he's being chased by these guys, these three brothers. And he gets a drop on them, and instead of killing them, he disarms them, sends their horses away, and he goes on to this town called Cayenne. Now, they know where he's going. I don't know how they know where he's going, but they know where he's going. And rather than walk the 3 hours back to Tombstone, they walk over and get some more horses and some guns and all this, and they go after him, and they're behind him. So he arrives in Cayenne in the morning. this is almost in real time when you think about it, because it's not. It's an 84-minute movie, so it's really moves along pretty quick. But, he arrives, shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning, and Carl Malden's the barkeep, and, he's drinking whiskey at 8 in the morning, and the sheriff comes in there, the marshal, actually. And the marshal turns out to be an old friend of his, an old outlaw buddy of Jimmy's, who has gone straight those past 8 years or so. And he's, now a marshal, and he is one of those guys that's revered around town. He's a tough guy. He doesn't even have to have a gun. He doesn't, his deputies are wandering around with shotguns and stuff, and he's just, cool. And he's come to Cayenne to see his estranged wife and their young son, who doesn't know that Jimmy is his father. And he wants to move to California with them. He wants to take them and move to California, change their name, leave all of this behind him. He is sick of being a gunfighter. He is sick of having to prove himself to every young, would-be, successor. Each contender that comes up, he doesn't want to have to keep killing people. He's sick of it. He's sick of the whole thing. And of course, he's in the bar, and he sends the sheriff. The sheriff says, well, she don't want to see you. She kind of made that clear. She changed her name. She's hiding out. She don't want to see you, Jimmy. And Jimmy goes, well, take her this, and just see what she says. So the sheriff takes her this, and she doesn't want to come to see him. And then a bar girl, to use the polite expression, Molly shows up, and Molly goes, well, hey, hi, Jimmy, how you doing? He goes, hi, how's Bucky? And she goes, well, Bucky be dead. Bucky been shot dead. Sorry. He goes, oh, that's a shame. I like Bucky. Bucky was another one of my outlaw buddies I used to run around with. And she goes, yeah, well, he's dead now. It's like, he had a good run. He was 27 or whatever. And he says, well, would you go talk to my wife, Peggy, and ask her to see me? And Molly goes, sure, why not? So she goes over and she goes. Meanwhile, the talk is in the town in Cayenne that Jimmy Ringo, the killer, is in the saloon. And it spreads all over. In the barbershop, there's this other young whippersnapper, Hunt, who is like, he's got two arms just like the rest of us. And, they're all the guys are talking about him. And there's this women's committee that wants to run him out, wants the sheriff or the marshal to run him out of town, led by Ellen Corby from the Waltons. So, look out for that. She'll be at the Waltons in 25 years. So anyway, and so all this stuff is going on, and there's this nice little scene where a guy is trying to kill Jimmy, an older guy who's probably 45, but an older guy is trying to kill Jimmy because he believes Jimmy killed his son. And Jimmy disarms the guy and takes him to jail and stuff and tells him, no, I did not kill your son. I wasn't even there when this happened, blah, blah, blah. And when he's there, locking the guy up, the ladies come in, and there's a nice scene with Gregory Peck talking to the ladies who are telling him about how awful this Jimmy Ringo guy is. All right. So there you go. So Molly goes to Peggy, and Peggy goes, well, all right, I'll talk to him over there. And he tells her his plan, and she goes, I can't do that. This is crazy, It's your Jimmy Ringo. You're this killer. He goes, what if I stay on the straight and narrow for a year? If I go to California and I start a homestead and I get all this stuff set up, and then I can come back. And she goes, well, maybe I'll think about it. In a year, I'll talk to you again about it. And then he goes, oh, I really want to see my son. Da, 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 da. She goes, okay, you can see your son, but you can't, let him know that he's your son. And he's fair enough, So he sees the kid and him. He's telling him about the toughest guy ever knew, which is the marshal. And he's talking about other things and doing all this, father stuff that really isn't father stuff because the kid only thinks he's Jimmy Ringo, the famous celebrity outlaw. And he's really kind of optimistic and happy about it. About that time, the three brothers finally arrive in town. Now it's a little after 10. So they finally arrive in town on that morning. And they get arrested right away. You know, they take the guns away from them. They're going to lock them up and stuff like that. And so Jimmy gets on his horse and he starts to run. He starts to ride away. And the coward Hunt comes out from the shadows and shoots him in the back. Gregory Peck, Jimmy Ringo, falls on the ground, laying there dying on the ground. And they're going to arrest Hunt, who looks like Eddie Haskell. I can't remember the actor's name. They're going to arrest Hunt. He tells them, he goes, "No, I drew first." And they're like, "No, don't help this guy out. No, no, no." He goes, "I'm not helping him out." And the marshal gets it. The marshal goes, "Oh, now he's got to live with the whole I killed Jimmy Ringo onus on him. And he's been cursed. And he's got to take this with him." And so, you know, the sheriff roughs the kid up and stuff like that and makes sure he understands that he's going to be on the run for the rest of his life and sends him on his way. I probably shouldn't have told the whole movie, but it's not that kind of movie that can be spoiled because the movie... I haven't given you the last scene, though. I will give you the last scene. So I'll just make this a total spoiler. It's Jimmy's funeral. And it's like an Old West funeral of some outlaw. You know, it's like, and we talked about The Shootist a couple of weeks ago, and The Shootist was just basically a crib from, you know, The Gunfighter. It's kind of the same story. John Wayne talks about, you know, don't put me out there and sell tickets for my funeral. Well, this is like one of those funerals where it's all jammed up. And Peggy and Jimmy Jr., whose name is now Walsh, or that's the name they've been going under, is Walsh. So Peggy and Jimmy show up at the funeral. And there's no room for them. And she says, "Go get the marshal, he'll make room for me." And the marshal comes out and gets her. And then when she's in there, she acknowledges that she is the widow, that she is actually Peggy Ringo, and that this is Johnny Ringo's son. And then you cut to the figure who's riding off in the dunes, which is presumably the kid Hunt, who's now the, you know, new champion of the world, who has to defend that belt every place he goes, and that's the curse. It's a good movie. It's really good. I'm going to show it in my class in July at Riverdale for Live Quest. Bob Dylan liked this movie. It's like there's a song on the 1986 album, Knocked Out Loaded, which is not one of the better Dylan albums, but it's 11 minutes and 5 seconds. If you can put up an 11 minute and 5 second song, this is the one. It's called Brownsville Girl. And basically it's Dylan talking about seeing this movie and seeing Gregory Peck in this movie, and he's talking to an old lover who he's okay with now because she's with somebody else, he's with somebody else, and they've made their peace, but he's telling her these stories, and he's talking about the gunfighter in that movie. And it's just this greatest bit of Americana that you've got that. Yeah, it's a really cool, you know, kind of cycle, the way it comes through. And if you think about, you know, Johnny Ringo in our culture, because you also have all these other elements, like the Ringo Kid, which was John Wayne's first breakthrough role. Actually, he was in The Big Trail, was his first starring role, and that was 1929. And 10 years later, he has his breakthrough role in Stagecoach, and he plays the Ringo Kid, who basically has no resemblance to Johnny Ringo except the name and the fact that he's an outlaw, okay? The Ringo Kid, which is the Marvel Comics character, who has absolutely nothing to do with Johnny Ringo. You have Johnny Depp as Rango. You have the spaghetti westerns. You had two different Ringos in those. Neither one of them had anything to do with this Johnny Ringo, but Johnny Ringo is a name that sounds familiar to most of us, and we know something about that gunfighter, you know. And then, you know, and like I said, it brings it back, and Dylan brings it back in that, and I don't know, I just think these things are cool, and I just wanted to talk about that because that's one of the things that we've been doing during our pandemic stuff, is watching old movies, and it's a great thing to do. Courtney Lanning, if you are watching, watch The Gunfighter. And I'll see you guys next week.